watching Republic.
Good evening, you're watching This is Exclusive with me, Sharvin Sen. Ladies and gentlemen, the tragic loss in Dubai and the sacrifice of an incredibly skilled young fighter pilot, Wing Commander Namansh Syal, is a moment for all of us to reflect on our self-inflicted limitations and the disservice that we are doing to our valiant soldiers. Make no mistake, the Indian Air Force is built with some of the toughest people, soldiers who are perpetually in operational mode. It is time that India's policymakers ask this hard question. Are you being fair to Indian Air Force? Are we giving them what they need? For the longest time, we have been playing catch-up. While there is no doubt that Tejas is a fantastic idea, but an idea that has woefully taken a long time. Now consider this. The government first cleared what it called the light combat aircraft in 1983. It took 18 years to take its first flight, 12 years for initial operational clearance, and another 6 years for full operational clearance. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the regrettable story of a fine idea, but a desperate attempt to catch up. That's our focus tonight on This is Exclusive. Let me take you through the headlines we are tracking at this hour. India bids tearful goodbye to Wing Commander Namansh Syal. Mortal remains cremated in Himachal's Kangra. French Navy slams Pakistan media for misinformation, says Rafale claims fabricated. Union Minister Piyush Goyal meets Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. India-Israel free trade agreement talks gain momentum, innovation, partnership on the cards. After political row, Home Ministry issues clarification on Chandigarh bill, says it has no plans to introduce a bill altering Chandigarh's governance. Ladies and gentlemen, India marked 2 months of the decommissioning of the last two MiG-21s, and now the Indian Air Force finds itself at the most precarious moment in 6 decades. Combat squadrons are down to just 29 against a sanctioned strength of 42. But even amid the challenges arose the Tejas, the radiant symbol of Atmanirbhar Bharat, conceived in 1983, first flown in 2001, inducted in 2016 with the Flying Daggers, and now surging forward with a 48,000 crore rupees deal. The road ahead remains unforgiving. First Mk1A deliveries are still a year away. HAL's production lines are stretched, and the AMCA 5th generation dream is still on the drawing board. But the message is unmistakable. From the MiG-21's fiery legacy to Tejas' luminous ascent, the Indian Air Force may be bruised and outnumbered tonight, yet its spirit soars unbroken.
It was in September 2025 when at the Chandigarh Air Force Station, India bid farewell to the MiG-21. After 62 years in service and over 700 units inducted, the last 2 squadrons, number 23 Panthers and number 3 Cobras, were grounded. With the retirement of the MiG-21s, the Indian Air Force's fighter squadrons plummeted to 29, the lowest since 1965, against a sanctioned 42 to counter twin threats from China and Pakistan. Legacy jets like Jaguars and Mirages faded without swift replacements, strained by procurement delays and engine shortages. With challenges on for the Indian Air Force, Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh had earlier warned that without 35 to 40 annual inductions, two-front readiness hangs by a thread. Then came the Tejas, India's beacon of self-reliance. Born from the 1983 Light Combat Aircraft program, this delta wing marvel first flew in 2001, embodying 75% indigenous content by line replaceable units. The Mark 1 entered the Indian Air Force service on the 1st of July in 2016, with No. 45 Squadron flying daggers at Bengaluru, transitioning from MiG-21s to operationalize India's first homegrown supersonic fighter. The No. 18 Flying Bullets followed in 2021, proving its mettle in air superiority and precision strikes. Where does Tejas position India? At the vanguard of indigenous defense aviation. From 59.7% local content in Mark 1 to 82% in Mark 2, it slashes import reliance. As a lightweight 4.5 generation multi-role ace, agile for border patrols, potent for strikes, Tejas frees Sukhoi 30s for deeper strikes. From MiG-21's fiery legacy to Tejas's radiant rise, the Indian Air Force endures. Not unscarred, but unbreakable. In Balakot's precision, Sindhur's storm, Kargil's peaks, and Dhaka's dawn, it proved numbers may falter, but spirit soars.
Well, in fact, joining us on this special broadcast is Air Marshal Diptendu Chaudhary, an experienced fighter pilot with over 5,000 sorties, someone who has commanded a fighter squadron. Thank you very much, Air Marshal Chaudhary, for joining us on this broadcast. A somber moment for all of us who have been tracking the Indian Armed Forces, particularly the Indian Air Force, in the backdrop of what we witnessed just about a few days ago at the Dubai Air Show. I want to first begin by asking you, what do you really make of the crash that has taken place of what is considered to be one of the safest platform that Indian Air Force has been flying?
Also, thank you very much for having me on your show once again. And yes, it's a horrible, horrible tragedy, which I think was witnessed by not only all the spectators who were live watching the show, but a vast amount of media spin-off which has been spread, the recordings which have gone viral, it has come on all the TV channels, and I think pretty much millions must have watched this tragedy unfold. But it brings to the fact that military flying military aviation is inherently a dangerous business. It's a dangerous game, and it is considered one of the most dangerous professions on the earth. But that is just the factor which is a part and parcel of every military aviator's life. But what is heart-rending is that when an accident takes place in full public display, it has enormous. It has an enormous effect in itself. And what happened was absolute a total tragedy. The Indian Air Force has made it very clear, and the Indian government has made it very clear that there will be in-depth, transparent investigations as a part of the court of inquiry, which has already been ordered. And the facts will be established till then exactly as to what went wrong. And I think till then, we should just respect the fact that it was an air show in which a premier platform of the Indian aviation industry was being showcased. And unfortunately, things went horribly wrong. But this is part and parcel of military aviation and display aviation, and I think the show goes on.
Air Marshal Diptendu Chaudhary, a question that I've been asked by many in the last few days, that after all, when it comes to fighter pilots like Wing Commander Namansh Syal, they must have gone through a lot of training, simulation, and in today's day and age, there is a lot more that goes into these kind of maneuvers that we are talking about, the negative G maneuver that has essentially taken place. I want to, perhaps put this to rest, that speculations, the speculative analysis that many have actually indulged in, and why perhaps it is not the right time to indulge in any sort of speculative analysis of what may have gone wrong.
I'm glad you flagged this point, Shan, and I think I want to reiterate what you have just said, that the most dangerous thing, and this is a trend which I've seen in the recent years, and especially I think the Operation Sindoor is sort of triggered off this. It's almost like a it's almost like a virus which people seem to have caught, where serious military aspects are being analyzed and discussed without in-depth analysis, adequate knowledge, and a lot of it is, I think, grandstanding on the media, with everyone giving their personal opinions. Whereas in military aviation, it's a serious business. And what the fine pilot that we have lost, he was a hardcore professional. And in this business of, military flying, and especially in the Air Force, these are accidents are a part and parcel of life. And this is something every aviator and all the loved and the near and dear ones come to terms with very early. And things go horribly wrong. But what is the most dangerous thing is the presumptuous speculation and conjecture, which is sort of spun off with everybody who's watched it. And, and today with technological tools that you have, everyone is replaying it again and again and analyzing without the adequate depth and without even letting the actual cause of the accident be established. And that will be done in its own time. And I think till then we must hold our peace, wait patiently, and only then will we drive the life lessons. There is this, I find this, there's an overwhelming urge on everyone's part to know what is happening. And in domains and to people whom these details will really, knowledge of these details will really not serve any purpose and except the fact that, I know the stuff. I know what happened. What is important, we must bear in mind that when an accident like this occurs, where a pilot and a platform are flying in total synergy, pushing the envelope. Remember, display flying, which is being done here, is not for crowd entertainment. It is a serious business of showcasing the combat capabilities of a military platform in the aviation world amidst peers and competitors and prospective buyers. So presumptuous and, the quick conjecture can only draw wrong conclusions and obscure the real facts from the real issues. And that is something we really need to bear in mind. And I totally agree with you that there is a need to hold our horses, wait patiently, let the facts emerge before we put our mouth where our money is.
Air Marshal Diptendra Chaudhary, at the start of this entire program, I did make a mention that this perhaps is the right moment to pause and reflect and ask this question. Are we doing enough for the Indian Air Force? And I'm making this very clear only because all that has happened in the last couple of years is that we've basically tried to project our military power. It may be politically incorrect to say this, but having said this, it is important that we look at the structural problems. Tonight, that is the attempt that I'm going to make over the next couple of minutes. And for this, I am also joined by Tom Cooper, who's joining us on this broadcast to perhaps also give us the international understanding of what has really happened here and perhaps how exactly India's air power can only surge further if at all we address some of the key issues, the structural problems, as I've been saying. Tom, thank you very much for joining us. We have a fantastic panel here. Air Marshal Diptendra Chaudhary, one of the finest strategic mind of our country, someone who's got a lot of experience, and he's finally agreed to come on board. Tom, I want to ask you, in light of the Dubai Air Show, there is a lot of propaganda that has essentially been doing the rounds about the Tejas itself. We in India certainly believe that while it has been plagued with certain issues, but it is also one of the finest platforms to be built. It's taken a long time, but the reality is that if it all goes well, then we are in a much better position. Tom, your views on that?
Thank you very much for inviting me. As regards for my views, the situation is simple. Tragically, accidents of this kind are happening. Whatever was the reason has to be found out, and this is left to official investigation. Of course, it's unfortunate and very unpleasant for India when this happens this way in public, de facto in front of the international public, of thousands of viewers, of thousands of cameras. This is not very, very fortunate, especially when you are, well, targeted the way you are targeted, or India is targeted by propaganda warfare from multiple directions, from Pakistan, from China, and from the United States. So from that point of view, you have to watch it from different aspects in order to fully understand it. You see it as Indians, somebody else sees it as, let's say, Pakistani fan or Chinese fan, somebody sees it as US American, and so on and so on. So everybody is interpreting from it his or her own position.
Right. Air Marshal Diptendra Chaudhary, I want to ask you, because this is something that those who are in the service cannot ask. Sometimes you feel sad that if at all an Air Force officer, serving Air Force officer speaks their mind about what they really need, they're essentially being targeted, or there's a name that has been given to them. Some are basically called, imported Bahadurs, and a lot of names are essentially given. Someone who deals with the Air Force quite regularly, I want to ask you, what is the need of the hour? Because our focus seems to be changing. We seem to be telling the world that, look here, Tejas is a fantastic platform you need to buy. And that is the reason why countries like Brazil and various other countries who have expressed the desire, Indonesia being one such, Argentina being the other, we are now concerned about, okay, since we have built a good thing, let's try and sell it. Not to really looking at what we need. We need to fortify our own situation here. Even before we are doing that, we are trying to sell it off.
I'm glad you asked this question, and I paid total attention to what you said in your introduction, and I totally agree on this. This accident, unfortunately, is come at a time and at a cross section of several events. One is, the IAF's combat shortfall, which is rapidly declining, and the need to fill the gaps. Second is the HAL's track record, and like you mentioned, the challenges which the Tejas has undergone, the entire program, and the years and years, the decades actually, which it has taken. And it has still not fully matured. What is flying is Tejas 1, Mark 1. What the Indian Air Force needs and has placed order for and is banking on to fill the gaps of the older squadrons having moved out is the Tejas Mark 1 Alpha, which is some time away from coming into and starting to fill the flight lines of the Indian Air Force. So we are in a critical gap. Combine it with and add to this whole, this complex issues are the outcomes and the fallout and the dynamics of Operation Sindoor, where we saw competitive aircraft industries seeking hard to play down the India's domestic industry to boost their own sales and own credibility, and trying to establish a narrative of a false narrative, which has turned out of the combat successes of a platform. So that we need to put that aside, and we also need to take our minds away from this horrible, unfortunate accident which has taken place and focus on the real issue. The real issue, and like you mentioned and you flagged, is the reducing combat potential and the capability and the capacity of the Indian Air Force, which has been flagged over decades. There has been enormous foot dragging on this to reach a point, to this extremely critical point that we have only 29 squadrons of a sanctioned strength of 45 squadrons. So the point here is that The main focus should be on filling the gaps. So when HAL, on which the Indian Air Force has taken a leap of faith in putting their entire trust and faith into producing the Tejas Mark 1A, which was initially a replacement for the MiG-21s, but now it has been dealing from that and now is a part of the Indian aviation industry's development program. It has placed 2 orders on the Mark 1 Alpha without the orders having even been fructified. Okay, there have been challenges. We've been hostage to the American engines in the absence of the Kaveri not meeting the mark for the Tejas, and this is the only way forward. So we are in a situation where at an inflection point where it is a desperate necessity for the Tejas program Mark 1 Alpha to succeed. Crashes happen. There will be problems along the way, but what is important here is to meet the requirements of the IAF on a accelerated scale, which you mentioned. Like the chief said, that we need at least 3 squadrons worth of production scalability and production capability, which the HAL has to step its act up onto to ensure that the numbers come in swiftly. At this critical juncture, if a national Maharatna company whose actual goal should be, fulfilling the national and the security interests of the nation, I think taking the taking the eyes off that ball and looking at boosting of sales of a platform which is still nascent and not fully mature is something we really need to consider. That do we really need to do that, or should we focus on meeting the nation's and the Indian Air Force's requirement first? Moment the company fulfills, the HAL fulfills, bridges the confidence gap, the trust deficit which exists at this point in time, and the enormous faith and support which the IAF has still shown in placing those orders, it needs to step up the bench to the crease out here and deliver. That should be its topmost priority. It should go on mission mode to deliver these platforms to fulfill these gaps. Moment the Indian Air Force squadrons start forming and they start flying, credibility and reliability of the platform will be the automatic benchmark, which will bolster exports in the future. Right now, the entire focus should be meeting the India's national security requirements and fulfilling the combat requirements of.
Tom, I want to take this last question to you. I'm sorry I'm not been able to ask you more questions. You've joined my show a little late. But the final word to you with regards to a direct comparison and the fact that many here in India believe, those who have been closely looking at every development, that we are basically held hostage here. The Americans did not want to give us the GE engines that has essentially led to the inordinate delay that we have essentially seen. How do you really look at this situation? Because for the Americans, selling the F-35 is more important, which I don't think so makes any sense to us. And because there have been 11 crashes when it comes to the F-35 itself.
Well, it is a massive problem, and I think this is a major failure of India not to develop a suitable engine for Tejas and actually for other fighter jets it is flying. Because, you are not taken seriously, and as you see on your own, you are taken hostage, and one is conditioning delivery of engines on all the possible, absolutely, or at least often irrelevant or issues which are not related in any way. So you have now to dance, so to say, on US music in order to get the engines for a jet which is under development for 20-25 years. This is extremely unpleasant. And in your position as a huge country which is, facing aggression from its Western neighbor, and not entirely in best relations with the northern neighbor, it would be advisable to solve this issue finally after all the years. It cannot be that India has no production of well, serious jet engine in terms of jet engine that can power a modern fighter jet in the 21st century. This is, excuse me for expression, but a shame, nothing else. So how do I see this? So again, you need the necessary financing, you need the necessary projects, whether it's Kaveri or some other engine, you have to do something in this direction and finally get this engine into production. Because you can develop theoretically, aerodynamically, fantastic fighters, no problem about this, but if you don't have the engine to power it, it's absolutely useless. All you have done in regards of investing into the airframe, into the avionics, into production facilities and so on and so on. The engine is making often more than 50% cost of the aircraft because it's so important. A reliable, powerful enough, trusty engine. This is what is necessary. And one cannot emphasize this strongly enough. Get this done.
Right.
Otherwise, you are going to continue being, de facto a playground for foreign powers, nothing else.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on this broadcast. Tom Cooper and Air Marshal Diptendu Chaudhary for at least touching upon some of those pressing issues. It's also a moment to perhaps recognize the sacrifice that has also been made by our valiant soldiers. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just a minor attempt that we've essentially made to put the spotlight on some issues that are plaguing our system, and it's time to raise our voice. That's all that we could pack in this edition of This Is Exclusive.
Pure Suji Pasta.